My name is Casey Neely, and I'm the program coordinator for USJETAA, the US Jet Program Alumni Association. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to further the US-Japan relationship by supporting alumni of the JET program. I was actually a JET as well. I was a JET in Kumamoto from 2013 to 2015. And I'm very excited to welcome Amelia Hagen, who is also a JET alumna and has over 15 years of experience in education initiative, events, programs, in youth diplomacy, leadership, and entrepreneurship, and many other things that she will talk about when she introduces herself. Before we get started with the webinar, there's a few things I'd like to mention. I'd like to let you all know about our call for submissions for the Japan Matters for America program. This is a partnership between USJETAA and the East-West Center in Washington, D.C. We're asking JET alumni to submit short abstracts to write articles on US-Japan related issues. In particular, we're focused on people-to-people connections between the US and Japan at the state and local levels. We will be selecting applicants to write full-length articles for the Japan Matters for America website. The deadline for this program is actually tomorrow. So if you're interested in this program, I would encourage you to check out our website and submit an abstract by tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. I also wanted to talk about some of our upcoming virtual events. It's USJETAA's 5-year anniversary this week. So we're throwing a virtual celebration next Wednesday on May 20th at 8:30 p.m. The registration for that event is already up, so I would definitely check that out and register if you're interested in joining. We also have another webinar upcoming on May 27th, and that will be with Ryan Pogg, and that will be on marketing your JET experience. So that's a very good sort of webinar that will sort of work off of this one if you're interested in professional development and those types of things. If you're a JET alumni and you're not a member of USJETAA, we definitely encourage you to do so. It's absolutely free and you can sign up on our website. Lastly, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping items. We encourage you to ask questions during this webinar. The best way to do that is through the Q&A feature. The Q&A feature should be at the bottom of your screen if you're working off of a laptop. If you have your phone, it should also be at the bottom of your screen, but you just need to tap the screen a couple times and then you should be able to see it pop up. You can write in questions at any time during the webinar, just so you don't forget, but we will be reading out the questions at the end of the webinar. So stay tuned to the end to have your questions answered. Lastly, I wanted to let you guys know that we are recording this webinar, so if you can't watch the whole thing and you have a question, you can still type in your question and we'll be posting it later and then sending it out to everyone. So I think that's all for me. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Amelia. And I encourage everyone to ask questions and write them in the chat box if you have them.
All right, thank you so much, Casey. I just wanted to throw the agenda up on here so you could see what's coming up. I'll do a little bit of an intro, talk about what personal branding is, some fundamentals, how you might think about communicating your brand. And then finally, I wanted to wrap up with talking about mentorship and opportunities. And then I hope to leave about at least 20 minutes for Q&A. But before I really get started, I just wanted to say that I hope everyone out there and their loved ones are staying safe and healthy as best they can amidst the pandemic. So who am I? Why am I holding this webinar? As Casey said, I'm a former JET. I was placed in Kitakyushu, Fukuoka. You might know it for Yakuza or all those crazy Yankee photos after coming of age day. I loved it, every minute of it as a JHS ALT. For the past 5 or 6 years, I've been giving an array of career development workshops, and kind of the personal branding niche is what I found to be most passionate about, because I see a dire need, especially now in universities and kind of at the young professional level. right now more so than before. I've worked with a variety of universities, NGOs, NPOs, parts of the UN, and a few different US embassies as well. So, just to throw it out there, there's a lot of content around what personal branding is. So what I'm aiming to do tonight is to give you a primer, like the tip of the iceberg, and to get you thinking about how you can tackle this conundrum if you've never thought about it before. I like to start off with this quote from Jeff Bezos, our newest trillionaire apparently, because it is what people say about you when you leave the room. Just today, I received an email from someone who mentioned a mutual friend of ours, and we were both gushing about him. And I thought, this is a great example of his own personal brand. He had no idea that this conversation was being had about him, but it was the mark that he left on us that left us saying positive things about him. So to put it simply, personal branding is a way in which you position yourself to stand out from everyone else by showing what your values are, your unique selling proposition, and then understanding and learning how to communicate this in an effective way with a specific goal or target in mind. And also this is including knowing your target audience. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but how are you differentiating yourself from all the other people out there who may be working to get the same job or similar promotions or take on new leadership roles, for example? Why should you care about this? Now, there are plenty more reasons besides what I have on the screen in front of you, but I think it opens you up to a wider variety of opportunities. So instead of you contacting people about what you can offer them, they're going to be the ones contacting you because they already know you, what you stand for, and what you bring to the table. What's your value promise? It can also open you up to people extending you different roles that you might not have already thought of. It gives you greater potential for collaboration or joining together with other people on projects that you would have never thought of. It gives you credibility. So if you're applying for a job or a certain position or you want a promotion and someone goes online and Googles you and nothing comes up, what might they think? Right? So they don't know what's already out there about you. Now, if they Google your name and they see, you've written lots of blog articles and you're clearly passionate about, I don't know, psychology, they're okay, this is what this person is really into right now. It can also get you a lot of recognition and prestige. So I always say to people, a lot of people are doing amazing things. I know tons of people in the JET community who are doing a wide variety of passionate things and very inspiring things, but a lot of times other people don't know about them. And so I always say, well, you need to share this with people so that they can see your passion and they may also be passionate about the same things as you. And then linking to this, you're going to have a higher perceived value. So you've done these amazing things, you're communicating it to the right people, and then they might say, okay, your credibility is higher and you know what you're talking about. Okay, I want to give them other opportunities. And so you might be connected to people that you might think are out of your league, for example, because of this. So this is just kind of a baseline of all the benefits that you can gain by thinking about your personal brand, what you stand for, what your values are, what you can bring to the table while you're communicating it to the right people. And I think the three most important things when you think about these benefits are authenticity, being intentional, and consistency. Are you doing this across the board so that people don't experience one person online and then a totally different person, in the physical sense? Because that's not authentic at all, right? So this is just a one sheet that I put together. So if you're starting with the basics, understanding how you're going to do these, first 7 things before you get to really figuring out your brand. So thinking about how to be yourself. This is not acting. I don't like people thinking about it in that sense. This is communicating who you are and not necessarily who you want to be. It's not putting on a show. It might involve being vulnerable. I think a huge part of it is telling your story and understanding how to do that effectively. It involves learning how to introduce yourself. And this can be done in 2 sentences. Hi, my name is, and I, blah, blah, blah. Thinking about your tools. So everyone should have a baseline resume or CV, kind of a core cover letter. And of course, these should be tailored every time, as I'm sure you know, or you should know. Thinking about your online profiles. Which platforms are you going to use? A bare minimum, I think, is having a LinkedIn profile when we talk about professional social media. And then also thinking about your email address. Is it professional? I know I shouldn't have to say it, but time and time again, I see email addresses that I just think are either out of date or not professional at all in a job setting. Business cards. Even if you don't have a job right now, I think it's really important to have a business card, especially as things start opening up, or you may be able to start attending some events again, to be able to give that out to people and thinking about what you want to put on it. It might be you don't have a position, but you can put your expertise. But kind of core information, your name, email, phone number, and then what you want to be known for. Dress, although, you know, we only need to have kind of appropriate tops right now if we're all meeting virtually. I think that you should be careful, and it's better to be more dressed up than more dressed down. If you are worried about your writing skills or you feel a bit rusty about them, I would recommend taking a writing class. And you can do this for free on Coursera, for example. And other community colleges have informal courses as well. And then the last 3, confidence is going to take time, I think. Everyone has a different level of confidence, but I think when you solidify the first 6 steps, this is going to lead to these last 3. So asking for feedback as well, reviewing and reassessing your personal brand regularly once you've fleshed it out. And similar to your LinkedIn profile, it's not a stagnant thing. This is a living, breathing, evolving thing. Now, yes, your values are pretty set in stone, I would think, but how you communicate them might change a little bit as you develop new interests or new passions simultaneously. So how do you get feedback about your brand? You might be sitting there thinking, I don't know what my brand is. How do I figure this out? And the easiest way is for you to ask other people, but also you need to think about it yourself. And so I think the easiest way to do this is by creating surveys. There are also worksheets. I can also include this when the slides are sent out, but asking people you know in various corners of your life questions about you. So what are the first 3 words you think of when you think of me? If you could pick my spirit animal, what would it be and why? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What skills do you think make me stand out from others? So there's lots of different questions that you can put together to ask people. And I know that there are varying levels of comfort in trying to get honest responses from people around you. So you can do this anonymously through Google, or you can get together in groups. I've worked with lots of participants who prefer to get a group of anywhere from 2 to 5 people together, and then all give feedback to each other through filling out paper surveys. I think that the more frequent you get feedback and get questions like this answered from other people around you, the easier it's going to be. And it's also going to be more comfortable for you. So you may be able to write down your answers. Okay, I think my strengths are X, Y, and Z. But if someone says your strengths are A, B, and C, then you are thinking about, why might this be? What am I not getting across that I want to get across to others? And at the same time, you might find out that other people see really cool things about you, or see that you can do awesome things that you didn't realize that you could. And so it might give you some additional ideas for how you can frame yourself in person and online. I think most of the people on this call have seen this, and I would be remiss not to include it. I think it's really important when we're talking about reflection to resort back to Ikigai, which, for anyone who might not know, means kind of your reason for waking up, or your North Star, as we talk about in leadership development circles. But tonight I want to hone in on passion. I don't think passion alone is enough for figuring out kind of where to place your brand, but I do consider it to be a linchpin that really kind of brings a lot of other things together. So how can I figure out my passion? Or, you know, maybe you're in a job and you don't feel like you get to use a lot of your passions into your brand. So I think the first thing to start with is authenticity. Telling people what you're passionate about and what goals you might have. You'd be surprised about how many responses you might get just by sharing this with other people, whether it's in person or it's online and it's within your family. If you don't tell someone that you want to, I don't know, set up your own MPO in the future working with kids, how will they know if they can help you or not? Or maybe they know other people who can help you. Learning to say yes. Now, I understand that this is taking a bit of a role change right now in our virtual world, but part of this is stepping out of your comfort zone and saying yes to things that might make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable. So say someone invites you to a gathering and you don't know anyone else there, say yes anyway. I think a great way of doing this that I think most of us can do on this call is looking at the different JAA events going on. And even when you're not involved in a certain JAA chapter, just joining in and meeting new people and getting to know them and sharing what you're interested in. I'll be the first to admit I don't know anything about anime and manga, but I learn a lot from other people, and I'm able to share that, hey, I'm really interested in hip hop and sports as well. So of course, this is being open to new experiences. Think about what you could talk for hours on end about. Whether you're on a 5-hour flight when we can fly again, what could really you go off the deep end because you have so much passion talking about this subject? It might be social justice. It might be animals. Think about things like, you know, the first section of Barnes & Noble that you walk to when you're interested in getting a new book. What section of the newspaper or what section of CNN.com or BBC.com do you turn to when you're reading new things? These are ways to kind of sift out some of your passions and then start thinking about ways that you can also connect them in your job or position or projects now. Part of this, I like to say, throw shoulds and shouldn'ts out the window. I think in society, no matter what country in, we have a lot of constraints, societal expectations. So I want you to think about what might be possible and how might you do this. So use the word might and use the word how a lot more than the should and shouldn'ts, or could and couldn't, so to speak. And in thinking about being great at one thing. So I know that as Jets, we have kind of this jack of all trades skill set sometimes, and we don't really know what to do with it. But if you could pick one of those things that you like the most or you feel drawn to the most, how can you build a skill set around that that also connects things that you like or things that you feel drawn to in terms of serving others? I'd also like to say, don't be afraid of polarizing others. So just because I said that means, you know, there should be respect, obviously, within these conversations, but don't be afraid of someone not agreeing with what you're saying is my point, or having another approach to something. I think that if you're passionate about something and you can back it up, it's okay for people not to it's okay for people not to agree with you. I think it's actually healthy, and you can actually learn from people disagreeing with you in this sense. With hanging out with fellow passionate people and the things that you like and that you're interested in, I also want to say, look at your career crushes. Who's someone in a similar line of work or who's following a career path that you really are in awe, or you like, or something that motivates you, or they've made you get interested in one thing? Who's that? Talk to them, ask them questions. And I think you'd be remiss to only network with people within your industry. I think there's great benefit to connecting with people who are in a completely different field. Just because you're in UX doesn't mean that you can't learn from someone who works in agriculture or sustainable tourism, for example. I think that's where a lot of creativity and really powerful ideas come from. And I think that can be incredibly motivating and give you more ideas for how you can put that into your brand. Being proactive. All of this involves being proactive and setting some time aside each day for working on improving your career interest or pursuing a passion project. I think that, you know, for example, if you don't have animals involved in your work, there are ways where you can, at least not right now, but volunteer with them in the future, or work on a campaign for animal welfare, and that can be done virtually. And so starting with things like passion projects may give you experience and credibility that you can then add into a career in this sector later. Giving back with enthusiasm, I think the easiest way to put it is sharing knowledge, sharing connections, and volunteering your time, whether it's virtually or later in person. I think this is the best way to pay it forward and also meet people. And understand that when you're paying it forward, you're not doing it with the assumption that you're going to get something back or get a favor for someone in 5 years. Doing something nice, sharing your expertise, sharing your interests with people, just because you like to, you think it might help them, and it's the right thing to do. And I think this is an opportunity for you to kind of share your story with other people, and also being authentic and genuine with people. And of course, I think being curious kind of links back up to being proactive. So a lot of times people will ask me, well, how did you find out about this? And how did you find out about that? And I said, well, you know, I just did my research. I was interested. I was curious. And I read up on this organization, or I followed this organization because I saw that their values aligned with mine, and I thought I might be a good fit for them. So some of the onus is on you to find groups of people who you think would be a good fit for you, but you have to take the time to do this. And this is something that needs to be consistent and not just, okay, something I do for a month, and then maybe I only revisit it when I need another job down the line, because that's not helpful. Is it needs to be done over time so that people don't think, you know, if you are asking for help, they're not just assuming that you're contacting them asking for a favor, and that relationship is already in place. So how do I communicate this? You figured out, okay, X, Y, and Z are my values. I'm good at A, B, and C. I like doing X for Y in this way. So who do I communicate that to? And how do I figure out, you know, the best way to do that? So I'm going to introduce kind of a quick and dirty guide to elevator pitches, and then also kind of mantra, personal brand statements. So I think most people have heard of elevator pitches, but often get stuck about how to craft a good one. So just some questions to get you started, thinking about who you are, what are your major accomplishments, your passions, your unique skills, what do you want, like where do you want to go, and kind of what path are you on now? And so these are just some very basic questions for you to think about. How might you communicate yourself to someone in only a few seconds? And you can practice this by timing yourself. You can also literally, you know, when we can move about a little bit more, put yourself in an elevator. And I've had people do this, and I've stood in the elevator with them, and I've had them give me their elevator pitch between floors to make them think about how they can be the most succinct. But this is going to help you figure out how you can really get your point across in a short amount of time in the most memorable way possible for the listener. So you are going to have to write several drafts. You should be practicing your body language. Do you feel hunched over? Are you approachable? Are you enthusiastic? Are you making people want to continue the conversation with you, even if they don't have time in that moment? So a lot of it might not be what you say. It might just be about how passionate you come across and how motivated. And so they might feel like, okay, I'm going to respond to that LinkedIn message that they just sent me. So you need to be thinking about your volume, your tone, your clothing, your handshake, and probably most importantly, the eye contact. And then practicing this over and over again. So you might be thinking, well, what does an elevator pitch have to do with a personal brand? But how you come across to other people in person is going to leave a huge impression on them. And this is your opportunity to leave a mark, even if you have only a short amount of time. And the world is so small now, you never know how someone you met ages ago might come back into your world or network, as an unexpected surprise. So this is really a great chance to kind of show people what you're made of and what you stand for in a short amount of time. Moving on to personal brand statements. You might kind of call this like a mantra or a motto. I like to refer to it as your value promise. So it should be clear, concise, and consistent. And as I said before, it should also be memorable, similar to your elevator pitch. So when I say establishing your brand on positive conditions, I want you to think about, do you have, a passion for making people happy? Are you passionate about doing good in the world or making a difference? Are you passionate about making meaning? So maybe some things that you are a little bit difficult for people. You might work in, the domestic violence area. And so it's not necessarily that you're making people happy in that sense, because that's a tough subject, but you are making meaning and making a positive or creating a positive influence on people so they can improve their household situations. So thinking about how are you making a difference in the world and what value you're bringing to other people. Now, of course, in the last slide, I said to be consistent. So by this, I mean creating one message and sticking with it. What are you the best at? So going back to being great at one thing and then creating a set of skills kind of linked into that. Who do you serve? Who are you benefiting with your work? And how do you do it uniquely? So if you're working in the international education sector, what populations are you serving? Are you serving US high school students? Are you serving students from South America who are coming on exchange? And how are you doing that? And it's not just the basic tasks that you're doing at work, but how do you take it a step further and exceed expectations in what you do, and that you're just not working on certain platforms behind the screen. So of course, the best way to start formulating these things are to take notes and to draft these over time, and then to share it with other people and get feedback. So when you share this with other people, ask, does this make sense to you? Do you understand where I'm coming from? If you don't get feedback on these things, I think it's a missed opportunity for you to improve it. Building and maintaining your personal brand online. So right now, this seems like the most pertinent because most of the stuff we're doing is online due to quarantine in a lot of places. By brand association, when you're creating online profiles, I want you to think about what organizations have you worked with before? Do these groups have a well-known name? Are you showing that you've worked with these organizations or these universities? Maybe you've worked with Harvard and Yale. That adds to your credibility. Expert quotes. You might not think why, or you might think, why would anyone want to quote me? You'd be surprised how easy it is to be quoted in publications. A lot of journalists and writers and online authors, they hang out on Twitter. And so a good way to kind of get in with them is to connect with them on online platforms like Twitter and to follow them, give positive feedback, and then you can reach out and say, I'm available. I see that you're interested or passionate on this subject. I have an expertise in this subject. Let me know if you need my thoughts at any one point. This can be highly effective. Is it going to work 100% of the time? No. But I think the mentality that, oh, why would anyone want to know what I think, is often holding us back. And so this is another way that you can put yourself out there. Skills, upskilling yourself, especially now, I think is crucial. And this will simultaneously help you build your brand. So treadmill learning, when I say this, is keep learning. I'm sure you've heard the term lifelong learning. Is what courses can you take? What webinars can you learn from? I know a lot of people out there are already taking courses, but thinking about what other certificates you might be able to attain that are low cost out there, and then how you can add and accentuate this on your LinkedIn profile or on certain job applications. Have you won any awards? How can you emphasize these? Is there a story behind a certain award? Sometimes I'm asked if I've won, special awards or where I've been noted. And my favorite award I've gotten was from a secret society at the University of Virginia. And so this is just like a really interesting conversation that often ends up leading to other topics with people that is less career focused, but more about building personal relationships with people. And that's where it's at. Underlying all of this is how you can build relationships with people so they're not coming to you out of like a professional or a need sense, but they like you as a person and they understand where your values are at. They appreciate that, and that connects with what they're also doing professionally. I've already mentioned volunteering, but I think that it's crucial to also pick. I don't think you should add, every volunteer experience you've ever had online. That's a bit unnecessary, but thinking about ones that have been the most meaningful to you, and what you've done to contribute to that effort is essential, because that can also show you what you're passionate about, and it also can show others what you've been committed to in the past. Social proof. I use this phrase to describe kind of everything that's coming up about you online. So if you're saying that you're really good at grant writing for the US government, is there proof of that online? Did you have winning bids? Did someone on your LinkedIn profile comment that you were instrumental in writing the grant? And then this links up with testimonials. So I think there's far less of an emphasis on LinkedIn endorsements compared to the actual recommendation section of your profile. I think it's often hard to get people to sit down and write positive things about you because everyone's busy even now. But I think often that says a lot more about a person as a professional and as a person than just reading through bullet points on a CV or looking at the number of endorsements. So thinking about what allies are always going to support you and who have supported you in the past and who would, jump at the chance to write glowing things about you. This is also part of building your brand online. Because when people look at your LinkedIn profile, they're not just looking at all the things that you've done. They're looking for that social proof, and finding testimonials is a really great way to do that. So when you're looking at your personal brand online, of course, there are so many platforms nowadays. I don't know if any of you want to be TikTok stars out there or you're big on Snapchat, but I would say the big four are still going to be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I don't have enough time to talk about personal branding online in this session, so I've just included these questions here to get you thinking about how you're conveying yourself online. And is it how you want to convey yourself in an intentional and an authentic way? So you should be considering, okay, what does my current online presence say about me? Based on the things that you post on Facebook or all your Instagram pictures. And what do you want it to say about you? So if someone were to stumble across this information, what impression would you want them to get? And yes, I'm aware if there are like closed privacy settings or something like that, but there are ways that people can still get your information. So I would just assume that anything that you post can be accessible by people in the future. What are your goals? What do you want your online profiles to say about you? And then how do you want them to help you down the line? So do you want to get a job in the pharmaceutical industry, but you're never posting anything on LinkedIn about pharmaceuticals? No one can see that you have any interest in this industry. So why would they really believe that if you want that job? So if you want that job in pharmaceuticals, okay, a good way to start is posting articles that you're reading about the pharmaceutical industry and adding your opinion as the caption. And part of that is understanding, you know, who and where are my audiences. So if you understand that you want to work in journalism, and as I said, a lot of journalists are on Twitter and that's how they get tips about stories and things like that, then maybe you should be on Twitter. Or maybe you're in the wedding planning biz, then maybe you should be on Pinterest and Instagram, because that's where a lot of people get recommendations about photographers they might want to hire, or florists, different planners, stuff like that. So being very intentional, you don't have to be across every platform saying the exact same thing. And even if you choose 2 platforms, it doesn't mean that everything that you post on Facebook is going to be the same thing that you post on Instagram. So if I think about my Snapchat, for example, my Snapchat is much more private. It's more personal. And people see a different side of me there. And it's not to say that, you know, I say a bunch of completely wrong things on Facebook all the time. I just think that Facebook is not where I want to be sharing absolutely everything in the same way I would put it on Snapchat. And I'm also aware that my audience on Snapchat is much more international than maybe my audience on Facebook, where I have, you know, more American friends, for example. And then I also know that, you know, in my LinkedIn community, there's such a wide variety of people that I tried to pick topics that things that anyone could relate to. And I think right now there's, you know, an obvious opportunity with the pandemic that most people everywhere are experiencing. Everyone can relate to that. Are you consistent over time and across platforms with how you're posting now? So, you know, if you're very passionate about cat memes, are you posting this on Instagram and Facebook? Or if you're really motivated about leadership development, are you posting this only on LinkedIn? Are you posting your thoughts on, you know, the current leadership amidst the pandemic? There's lots of blogs on there out there writing about that now. So how are you showing the same side of yourself? Or if you choose not to show certain content, how are your values still being communicated across all of those platforms that you're choosing to share on? So even if the actual content of what I'm sharing on Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram are different, people can still see that I'm very passionate about social justice, personal development, global mindsets. I think that's very clear. And so even if that content varies, the core of who I am and how I interact with others is still going to be clear to people. And that's also kind of underpinned by the relationships that I have with people in person, of course. Like I said before, we don't want a different person online, and we don't want a different person, you know, in the physical sense, because that's not a brand. Going back to the value promise that we talked about before, I would love for you to think about how can your presence and your work provide value to others, and how might you need to adjust this? And I included this second question here just because a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs, a lot of organizations are having to pivot amidst the pandemic. So, you know, maybe a lot of your value you feel comes across more in person, and it's more difficult for you to convey that in an online setting. So if you've realized this gap, how can you close the gap? What training, what practice can you get to make it easier for you to get out of your comfort zone and help you to feel more comfortable in an online setting? What are you knowledgeable about, and how can you share this with other people? A great example, some of you know I was in New York City. I met some awesome Jets while I was there at the end of February, and I met with a Jet alumni who is doing amazing things in TV production. And she had worked with all these like famous TV shows, and I was just in awe, and I was so impressed. And I was like, people have no idea that you're doing this, and I think it would be great inspiration for a lot of Jets out there who may not want to go into kind of traditional Jet fields. And I just really encouraged her to share that, because I thought it was an opportunity for people to learn from her, and for her also to mentor other people. And I thought, even for me, who has no knowledge about TV production, my mind was blown, and it was, absolutely fascinating listening to her stories and kind of understanding how she developed that path for herself. So like I said, I just kept stressing. I was like, share this story because it's really powerful, and it's not bragging. It's showing kind of all the frustrations and challenges and successes you experienced, and then helping people learn from the experience as well. And then, at the end of all of this, you should understand how your privacy settings function. So when you are sharing this content and just kind of practicing with sharing content in this way, in a more intentional way, that you don't feel like you're oversharing, and thinking about, what's going to be out there in the future. And part of this also, I would say, is just, if you haven't already, is Googling yourself and understanding what information about you is out there. Do you like that information out there? Are you okay with it? And, if those articles or if those photos or the work that you've done, if that's super positive and you didn't know there was an article written about it or something, how can you link that in to your LinkedIn profile or share that with other people by, again, showing what you're interested in, knowledge, and passionate about. Now, finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about mentors before we move to questions. I always get a lot of questions from people about, like, I want a mentor, but how do I find one? And I think a mentor is a good way to help you figure out your personal brand, to build your personal brand, and to get solid feedback about what you're doing so far. And so I think that it is easy to just look one step up the ladder and say, okay, my boss can be my mentor. But I think you need to look at everyone in your network, whether it's family members, it's subordinates, it's, your boss's boss, it's people in different industries. But thinking about not just one mentor, but having, 2 to 3 mentors minimum, because I don't think that one mentor is going to be able to provide every answer or to give you necessarily the feedback that you need when you're thinking about developing and fostering not only your personal brand, but who you are as a professional and who you want to go, or who you want to be in the future. And so I list co-mentoring down here is because I think that you can do this with a coworker or a colleague that you really admire. And so I have someone who I call my work wife, and we have some similar skills, and then we also have some very different skills. And she has plenty of experience I don't have in some areas, and vice versa. And so I find that we're inadvertently co-mentoring each other, giving us advice on different topics that we know like more about than the other. And this can be more casual, more informal, and more comfortable as well than kind of a more stereotypical mentor relationship. You should be meeting any way you can. So right now it's probably going to be virtual, but I think the most important thing on here is that you should be asking people to be your mentors if you know that they're going to make you accountable. This is not a friendship. This is not necessarily even an advisor. I like to say that a mentor is more like a coach. And look for people who are not going to give you the answers immediately, but who are going to ask powerful questions to help you discover the best answers for yourself. And then they're going to ask more questions to, again, hold you accountable and to help you come up with tasks or actions to help you follow through on what you've designated as like goals for yourself. And so you can start with this personal brand project, but I think it might start with getting feedback from other people, because that's often difficult or uncomfortable for people if they're not used to it. But at the end of the day, you have to remember to say thank you. And it doesn't have to be flowers. It doesn't have to be but at the end of the day, just saying thank you and acknowledging kind of the time, the energy, and the resources that a person might be spending with you, especially now because a lot of lifestyles have been turned upside down. I think people's time is even more precious than it was before. And so a basic thank you can go a long way. Oops. And then finally, being open to opportunity and change, especially now we have a world of uncertainty swirling around us. But if you can do one thing in this realm, just do one thing every week to advance your career. It might be looking for new connections on LinkedIn. It might be getting feedback about who you are as a professional from your peers or your family. But being able to cast a wide net and not to limit yourself, but being open to different possibilities or maybe different fields or interests that you might not have thought of before. If you have very specific passions or interests in a certain sector and industry, I really encourage you to get email alerts about different topics. I think international affairs is a great way to start. If you look at The Atlantic or, you know, the Council on Foreign Relations, you can get tons of alerts through those organizations. And then studying the stars. So who are the really famous people in your industry who have tons of connections, who are doing amazing and inspiring things, you know, have, you know, shifted their careers seamlessly amidst the pandemic, and what are they doing right, and how can you emulate them? And simultaneously, how can you do some things different from them to show your own value promise? And then last but certainly not least is learning. Is I always say you either you win or you learn. You don't lose here. And so understanding that making mistakes is okay when you're kind of developing your brand and building relationships in the process, and that people aren't going to crucify you for it. It's okay. And that the mistakes are part of the process, and not being afraid of failure here, because you're going to learn from these mistakes to be like, okay, you know, maybe I shouldn't have written that, or maybe I could have phrased this a little bit better to get some interest from other people. Or maybe I posted in this one group and I got a lot of interest. Okay, you know, are there some collaboration opportunities out there that I should start thinking about that I, you know, didn't consider before? So learning at the end of the day is probably the most important part of this process. So I know this is a lot to take in, and again, it's really hard to fit in such a short amount of time, but I want to leave the rest of the time for questions. But, you know, with this context is how you look, how you speak, and how you act is your personal brand. So these things need to be if people don't trust you, it's going to be hard for them to want to do business or interact or form partnerships with you in the future. So it's absolutely crucial. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. I wish we had a little bit more time, but we'll see how far we go.
Thank you, Amelia. That was really interesting. I feel like you gave a lot of things for people to think about and a lot of things to put in practice as well. Just to remind everyone, if you want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we already have quite a few questions, so I'll go ahead and jump right into them. The first question we have is from Tabitha. My email is my initials, full last name, and 2 numbers at the end. Is this considered unprofessional?
I wouldn't throw it out there and say like, this is really bad and this is unprofessional, but I think the most professional email address that you could have is something that's strictly your name. Now, if you have a ridiculously common name, you might have to put those numbers in there, but I always just think it's best to stick with your name.
Okay, great. And then we have 2 sort of related questions. The first one is, do you have any specific advice about narrowing down that one thing we're good at? There's really no one thing I could talk about for more than an hour. And then the second comment is from Colleen, and it's semi-related. I was wondering about how to navigate when your goal or brand seems split. For example, I am an artist and I want to connect with other artists, collaborate, and get into a master's program. But I am also looking for work teaching English to support myself. So I want my brand to be able to promote both sides of me.
Okay. So the first question I would say is that you need to ask people. I think it's quite limiting to say like, oh, I could really only talk about one thing for an hour. I guarantee there is something out there. And so I think the best thing for you to do is to ask other people. and get that feedback from especially close people around you, and to think also about how you spend your time every day. I know people that are really obsessed with watching other people play video games, and they can tell me all about that, and I really have no clue. And I'm so curious that people can sit there and do this. But I think the first step is asking people, and then also thinking about how you spend your time currently and how you would like to spend your time. I would start with those. And then I would also look at, going back to like childhood, and then also times during university, or your time on JET, and how you spent your time then, and where your interests lie during then, to kind of draw a mind map of sorts to think about that. With regards to the two goals about, what was it, art and teaching English, right, to support the artist lifestyle, I would make that part of the story. And also, given all of our experience on JET, is to, and that would be in the next webinar, is to say, okay, I had this experience on JET, and that's motivated me to want to teach English, and this is why. So if anyone has seen the TED Talk by Simon Sinek, it's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so combining and communicating your passion for art and collaborating with other artists with your previous experience teaching English, I think there's opportunity there. So I don't think that you have to go down two different routes. I think that you can combine these things, and also tie it back to like a passion in the world at large, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's a great answer. This is from Lee. How do you figure out who are the experts in a given field?
I hate to say it, but like sometimes it's Google, and also it's LinkedIn, and looking at different people who might have a lot of connections. A lot of times I've gotten recommendations like, oh, you should check out this person. So I've gotten recommendations from other people. I would also look at media publications. So in, years ago when I started getting interested in personal branding, I looked up kind of personal branding experts, especially for the millennial generation. And then I looked at the work that all of these so-called experts were doing. And I looked at, I think his name was Dan Schauble, if anyone wants to jot that down. How he articulated things was what I really kind of totally agreed with when I saw it. And so I think that some of it is just like basic online research, but then seeing, okay, are there other publications that this person has? What's listed on their LinkedIn? Do they have testimonials? So again, that's that social proof. So you could start with like, I don't know, writing experts. But again, you might need to whittle that down and say, okay, are we talking about nonfiction? Are we talking about biographies or whatever? But then also validating it. So have they worked with certain organizations before? What works do they have to their name? Do they have testimonials? So I think, at first it seems like a very nebulous big cloud to find needles in a haystack. But I think once you start sleuthing, is what I like to call it, some people are going to stick out.
That's very useful advice. Okay, switching gears a little bit, this one's about business cards from Jesse. I was wondering what business cards look like during COVID. I was reconsidering ordering them because there are no more physical events where you'd actually give them to people. And then you highlighted them tonight. Is there a good digital replacement that's popular?
Right now, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I think that you could just design something using Canva, which is what I would do if you wanted to have like a digital stamp. I would go to Canva. They have lots of different templates that you can work with and still give you kind of the freedom to be creative. But you might need to think about where the best place is for me to leave that, or is it more effective for me to share my LinkedIn profile? Because otherwise you might need to worry about the digital design on that. And then, okay, once they have that, their next step might be to Google you anyway.
And then working off of that question, Alex had a question. What are your thoughts on maintaining a personal website, and what should it include even if you're not looking for a job at the moment?
I think it depends on your industry and kind of what you do and what your goals are. Most people I know don't have one. I think they would rather put all of their efforts into the LinkedIn profile. But I think that if you're in creative industries, art, photography, things of that nature, graphic design, it would be helpful for you to have a personal website, because it's probably an easier way for you to show your work. You can put a portfolio on there. You can have an about me section. You might have a tab that, no matter what industry you're in, you might have a blog tab, and it just might include your opinions on, the most recent developments in medicine, for example. I think so much comes down to industry, and kind of the nature of that industry. A lot of industries have this expectation that you would have a personal website, and then others, it doesn't really matter. I recently saw a job application where they weren't taking CVs, resumes, or cover letters. They were asking for a link. So you put in your LinkedIn profile, your own personal website, or a blog, and that was your application. And so, of course, a personal website would be handy, but you need to think about, is that going to convey information in an effective way for the reader? Because if you just share a personal website with a recruiter or something, they might just turn around and ask you for a CV or LinkedIn profile. So I think that your understanding around that needs to start with your industry, and by talking to your peers, to see what would be useful before going ahead and jumping into one.
Seems like good advice. So the next question is, what do you think is one of the most important things you could do in the current climate to solidify your brand?
I think being honest, and sharing with people how you're doing, and asking others how they're doing, and being open about how things might have changed for you. And the number one reason I say this is because it builds empathy. And I think we're social beings. We all crave connection, even those introverts out there. And so I think it says a lot when you reach out to people, checking in on them. It doesn't have to be a general Facebook post or whatnot, or an Instagram post, but just sending them a message, even if you haven't talked to them in a long time. I think that says a lot. And I know it's not out there, and maybe it's not the response that people would expect, but I think it's the most meaningful. And people don't remember what you did necessarily, but they remember how you might have made them feel.
And I'll jump in and add to that. Several of our last webinars were actually focused on how to network, how to reach out to people during this time, and best ways to do that. So if you guys are more interested in that topic, I would also encourage you to check out those webinars as well. Next question: in pursuing your own career through changing jobs several times, which have you put more focus on, consistency or variation? Do you think it's better to move frequently between jobs to keep your learning curve sharp?
I think that in my own path, in my own journey, I discovered that I really like variety and flexibility. And so in the last few years, I set myself up with a job based in Central Asia. And that gave me flexibility during 4 months of the year to pursue other passions that I had. So I think that part of this, you need to think, if you're contemplating this, you need to think about what are your work preferences? People talk about work-life balance. For me, it's work-life integration. And so there might be times where I'm working a lot in 18, 20-hour days. And then there are other times where I have free time for 2 weeks and I go travel. And so for me, it's looking at, okay, where can I do projects that are really meaningful to me, and it's giving me an opportunity to make a difference and to help others. But of course, like, I need to make money too. And so it is a balancing act in that sense. But for me, I'm less concerned about changing jobs all the time, because research increasingly shows that as time goes on, millennials and Gen Z, it used to be we changed jobs 7 times in our life. Now it's going to be 15 plus times. So I'm kind of less worried about that and how that sticks out. And then I'm also cognizant of the fact that some of the opportunities that I have been privileged enough to have, they are time, there are time constraints around them, similar to JET, for example. But I think kind of goes down to like your own work preferences and like your life priorities, because I understand that my lifestyle is not for everyone, and it shouldn't be, right? And people have different priorities. So I understand that, I found preferences in how I work, and I've tried to make adjustments around that accordingly.
That's great. Okay, so we'll wrap up with one last question. What is the best approach when contacting someone online? If you're connecting with them with a JET, is it helpful to mention you did the JET program? And then I'll also add, are people able to contact you after this webinar if they have other questions and things like that?
Yes, I would say if you're contacting like a fellow JET alumni, I would definitely say that you did the JET program too, and I would include the year, city, and prefecture. If you can tell on their profile that they did JET in Shimane-ken, for example, and you went to Shimane-ken on JET, I think it's a nice touch to put like 1 or 2 lines about your experience in Shimane, because I think that helps facilitate connection, and people are always so Natsukashi about their JET experience. But I also people like getting compliments in general, and people like talking about themselves, I think. And so if you read something on their LinkedIn profile, or you were referred to that person, say why, who you were referred by. And if you say, oh, something in your LinkedIn profile X stood out to me because I am interested in this, or I have questions for you about this. I mean, I messaged someone I didn't know on LinkedIn a few days ago because I was interested in to hear about his experience in Cambodia. And like simultaneously, I looked at his LinkedIn profile and I thought, actually, you have like a really good profile for some jobs at an NGO I've worked with. And so I sent him a link. And like, for me, that was nothing. Like, and I don't know if he was looking for work, but I just thought like, this is the type of person that I would want to work with. Why wouldn't I, send that information to him? So those are just some, a couple examples that you can do. And absolutely, I'm happy to have anyone on here contact me or like gush about Japan or, whatever. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Yes, and you're also able to add me, and Bahia Simon Slayton, who's the executive director, is also on the webinar. Add her on LinkedIn as well and connect with us if there's anything that we can do for you. So I wanted to thank you, Amelia, for doing this webinar. It was really great, really informative. And I just want to let everyone know again that we'll have upcoming webinars this month. Please check on our website. We also have our 5-year anniversary celebration and our East-West Center contributor program, which is due tomorrow, if anyone is interested in that. We will be sending out the recording of this webinar. Just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy during this time. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening or day wherever you might be.